The wind on the Ukrainian front is blowing from a completely different and far harsher direction today. Look closely at the global satellite feeds, and you will see a massive tactical shift that demands instant attention. For months, Russian intelligence and Western military analysts were hyper-focused on the muddy, cratered trenches of Zaporizhia, expecting the main blow to fall there. But Kyiv just pulled off a masterclass in operational deception, suddenly pivoting its entire strategic weight 100 miles to the east. The target is Mariupol, a coastal stronghold that beats at the very heart of the most vital logistical arteries keeping the Russian war machine alive in the south. This is a profound turning point in the conflict, a high-stakes gamble to seize the initiative on the southern lines and break the back of the occupation. If the name Mariupol triggers a sense of grim history, it should. The world watched with bated breath in the spring of 2022 as a handful of defenders held out in the dark, airless tunnels of the Azovstal iron and steel works, defying a relentless siege until they ran out of ammunition. Today, the heroes of that unparalleled resistance have returned to settle their unfinished business, and they are bringing a terrifying evolution in modern warfare with them. The re-engineered 1st Azov Corps has officially taken the field, and this return is far more than a symbolic march of revenge or an emotional homecoming. It is a massive kinetic force multiplier designed to provide invaluable tactical support to an estimated 90,000 to 130,000 Ukrainian soldiers currently locked in brutal combat across the entire southern theater. The scale of this confrontation is staggering, backed by billions of dollars in advanced Western security assistance and met by a deeply entrenched Russian defensive network that has cost Moscow immense economic treasure to construct. The historical friction between these two nations has built to this exact breaking point, where the survival of entire field armies depends entirely on a math problem of consumption. Every single logistics line collapsed in the rear. Every fuel tanker detonated, and every ammunition dump vaporized saves the lives of frontline Ukrainian soldiers fighting in the trenches. By cutting off the flow of supplies, Kyiv aims to radically alter the fate of the land bridge, that vital geographic corridor connecting the Donbass directly to Crimea. The land bridge has been viewed by the Kremlin as its single greatest strategic victory since the invasion began, a territorial prize they cannot afford to lose. Yet, as the first Azov units crossed into the operational zone, they delivered a spine-chilling message through official media channels, declaring simply that they had returned to Mariupol. They did not arrive with the heavy, roaring armored columns or the massive tank convoys of 20th century military doctrine. Instead, they have unleashed a stealthy, invisible operational network that completely bypasses Russia's multi-million-dollar defense grids, turning the occupier's secure backyard into a smoking graveyard. With the strategic pieces on the board shifting so rapidly and the Russian supply lines beginning to choke under this relentless aerial siege, how exactly will Ukraine's elite mechanized brigades leverage this chaos on the ground to tear the gates of Crimea off their hinges? To tear those gates open, Ukraine is exploiting a vulnerability that money alone cannot fix. The answer lies in the unforgiving geometry of a 100-mile circle of death drawn around Mariupol. By projecting an operational web exactly 100 miles deep behind the line of contact, the 1st Azov Corps has effectively erased what Russian commanders long considered their secure sanctuary. In the past, Russian reinforcements and supply convoys could mass safely outside of conventional tube artillery range, organizing their assets before making the final run to the active trenches. Now, that entire rear area is a high-risk zone, where any concentration of force is instantly detected and targeted. This spatial dominance directly alters the calculus for Ukraine's heavy armor, allowing elite units like the 47th and 65th Mechanized Brigades to press the front lines with the confidence that the enemy forces facing them are already starved of fuel and ammunition. The physical terrain of the southern front dictates a brutal reality for any moving army. This is the vast, open Ukrainian steppe, a flat expanse of agricultural land with virtually no natural cover, where an advancing armored vehicle can be seen from miles away. During the dry season, the ground bakes into a hard, dusty plain that allows rapid mechanized movement. but it also creates massive dust clouds that expose troop positions to long-range thermal optics. When the seasonal rains hit, this rich black soil transforms into a deep, clinging mud that can swallow heavy tanks whole, funneling all military traffic onto a few vulnerable paved highways. To advance even 10 or 20 miles across this exposed landscape is a logistical nightmare if the enemy possesses functional artillery. By keeping the Russian rear under a permanent state of siege, Ukraine turns this open terrain against the occupiers. That forces Russian forces to defend vast sectors without the guarantee of resupply, while Ukrainian air assault units execute rapid infiltration maneuvers through the broken tree lines and drainage ditches where heavy armor cannot easily tread. When you break down the progression of this campaign, you see a systematic, multi-layered operation unfolding day by day. It began with a deliberate replication of the successful April chokehold around the Donetsk Ring Road, where Azov units targeted critical transit bottlenecks near Djurs, Andriivka, and Starobashev. By launching coordinated swarm strikes at narrow bridge crossings, they successfully isolated the 1st Donetsk Army Corps, leaving frontline artillery batteries entirely without shells for days at a time. With the highway networks crippled, the operation immediately transitioned into its second phase, focusing squarely on the permanent concrete fortresses Russia constructed inside Mariupol. Day after day, aerial reconnaissance mapped the precise coordinates of Base Alpha, the massive reinforced logistics hub handling fuel tankers, and Base Beta, the sprawling assembly area where fresh armored units are prepped for combat. Russian forces believed their heavy electronic warfare shields and concrete watchtowers would keep these facilities immune. But Ukrainian planners used the precise tracking data to systematically isolate these fortresses, cutting the asphalt arteries running toward Berdyansk and Henichesk, and turning Crimea into a lonely logistical island. As these tactical pincers tighten, the Russian army is slowly being suffocated in a massive operational trap. Every mile the Ukrainian mechanized brigades advance on the ground is bought by the invisible pressure applied to the Russian supply lines far in the rear. It is a brilliant display of 21st century maneuvering, showcasing how modern operational art can dismantle a numerically superior force by attacking its belly rather than its teeth. Yet, in the unforgiving realm of realpolitik, even the most brilliant tactical concepts and flawless geographical maneuvers mean absolutely nothing without the actual physical machines of war capable of executing them. To truly understand how this logistical strangulation is achieved, we have to look past the troop movements on the map and examine the specific, high-tech hardware that is tearing the Russian defense network to pieces from above. At the absolute tip of this technological spear is the Swift-Beat Hornet kamikaze drone, a weapon born not from traditional defense contractors, but from the rapid prototyping ecosystem of Eric Schmidt's perennial autonomy under Project Eagle. On paper, the Hornet looks like a deceptively simple, lightweight tech project, costing a mere $5,400 to manufacture. But its technical specifications tell a much more lethal story. Equipped with a micro-turbocharger engine, it can maintain steady cruise speeds of 70 miles per hour, while carrying an 11-pound high-explosive fragmentation warhead designed for maximum thermal and kinetic output. Its operational range easily clears 62 miles, with a maximum precision ceiling extending up to 100 miles deep into enemy territory. On paper, a drone with these basic physical dimensions should be easily neutralized by standard military-grade electronic warfare. In the harsh reality of the 2026 battlespace, however, the Hornet has proven completely immune to Russia's most sophisticated jamming complexes, such as the Krasuka-4 and the Pol-21. This is because the Hornet does not rely on a continuous radio control link that can be severed. It utilizes an integrated Starlink satellite terminal for its mid-course navigation guidance, and once it enters the target area, it switches over to a completely autonomous, localized computer vision database. It scans the terrain using onboard optical sensors, cross-referencing shapes against thousands of military vehicle profiles to distinguish a Kamaz fuel transport from a civilian car in a matter of milliseconds. This autonomous kill chain has exposed a fatal programming flaw in Russia's multi-million-dollar short-range air defense networks, specifically the Pantsir S-1 and Tor M2 systems. On paper, the Pantsir S-1 is a formidable platform, pairing twin 30mm automatic cannons with 12 radar-guided missiles designed to intercept aerial threats up to 12 miles away and at altitudes up to 33,000 feet. In real combat over Mariupol, the Pantsir has become an expensive casualty. The system's radar algorithms are fundamentally designed to track traditional, fast-moving targets like cruise missiles, fighter jets, and large combat helicopters. When confronted with a low-altitude, composite material drone like the Hornet, which possesses an incredibly small radar cross-section and almost no thermal signature, the Russian radar suites mistake the threat for a flock of migratory birds or atmospheric clutter, filtering it out entirely. By the time the Russian crew hears the acoustic buzz of the drone, it is already executing its terminal 70-degree dive, turning the air defense vehicle into a charred hull of twisted steel. This failure has triggered a logistical nightmare for Russian commanders, who are now forced to pull these rare, high-value air defense assets away from the actual front lines, just to protect individual highway intersections and fuel depots in the rear. The kinetic reality of the southern front is further complicated by the heavy armor operating on the ground, where the gap between theoretical specifications and combat performance is equally stark. Ukraine's 47th Mechanized Brigade relies heavily on American-supplied M1A1SA Abrams tanks and M2A3 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles. On paper, the Abrams is the undisputed apex predator of the modern battlefield, protected by a dense matrix of composite armor and capable of firing a 120mm depleted uranium sabot round that can pierce any Russian hull from 2 miles away. But the reality on the ground reveals a massive logistical burden. The Abrams is a 70-ton monster that exerts immense ground pressure, making it highly susceptible to getting bogged down in the treacherous mud of the steppe. Furthermore, its gas turbine engine is incredibly thirsty, consuming an astronomical 8 gallons of fuel for every single mile traveled. If the supply trucks carrying that vital fuel are intercepted by drones 40 miles behind the line, these multi-million-dollar tanks are instantly reduced to stationary, helpless pillboxes. This vulnerability is mirrored on the Russian side, where the elite 810th Naval Infantry Brigade utilizes the T-90M Proryv tank. On paper, the T-90M features advanced explosive reactive armor and a sophisticated fire control system capable of engaging targets while moving at speeds of 40 miles per hour. Yet, in actual combat, the T-90M suffers from a catastrophic structural vulnerability known as the carousel effect. Because its automated ammunition loading system stores extra shells in a mechanical ring directly beneath the turret, a single top attack strike from an agile drone can ignite the entire payload instantly, blowing the turret hundreds of feet into the air and killing the crew. The logistical nightmare of keeping these heavy armored formations fueled and armed in an environment completely dominated by autonomous air threats has shifted the entire nature of the war. It is a sobering realization for military planners worldwide that modern conflicts are no longer won simply by accumulating the heaviest armor, the fastest jets, or the largest stockpiles of conventional ammunition. Instead, the ultimate victor is decided by an invisible, bleeding-edge struggle of systemic endurance, economic resilience, and asymmetric strangulation. The true gravity of the situation in the south becomes clear when you realize that the kinetic fire from the sky is only half the battle. Behind the scenes, the Russian occupation is suffering from a systemic, logistical cardiac arrest that no amount of battlefield bravado can fix. For the Kremlin, the southern land bridge was supposed to be the ultimate strategic trophy, a permanent geographical connection between the Donbass and Crimea. To secure this dream, Moscow buried a staggering $12 billion into a desperate alternative logistics network, attempting to build a brand new railway line stretching between Donetsk, Volnovakha, and Mariupol. This massive infrastructure project was designed to bypass the aging and vulnerable Crimean bridge, creating a high-capacity artery that could move heavy equipment and fuel even under constant threat. But in a masterstroke of asymmetric warfare, Ukrainian partisans and deep strike drone units have turned this $12 billion investment into a smoking financial black hole. According to reports from the field, partisans have systematically sabotaged the signaling infrastructure and main control centers of these rail lines, while Azov's Hornet drones target the rolling stock under the cover of darkness. The result is a total collapse of the commercial and military supply chain. This economic suffocation is amplified by the weight of global sanctions that are finally hitting the marrow of the Russian defense industry. While Russia can still produce basic steel and explosives, the high-end microelectronics and thermal sensors required to repair the failing radar systems of the Panzer S-1 or the sophisticated optics of the T-90M are becoming impossible to source. The supply chain blockades have left the Russian military in a state of technological regression, forced to deploy older, less capable equipment into a theater dominated by cutting-edge artificial intelligence. As the land bridge is severed and the sea routes are paralyzed by Ukrainian unmanned surface vehicles, Crimea is transforming into a massive, isolated logistics island. On May 2026, the Russian administration was forced to officially admit that the land corridor was under absolute Ukrainian fire control, halting all commercial passages and banning civilians from using the routes. This is the ultimate paradox of the Kremlin's southern strategy. The very territory they fought to liberate has become a logistical graveyard that is bleeding the national treasury dry. The pressure is not just financial, it is deeply social and political. Inside the ruins of Mariupol, the 9th Guards Motorized Rifle Brigade and the 810th Naval Infantry try to maintain a veneer of control through forced colonization, issuing Russian passports and imposing brainwashing curriculums in the few schools left standing. But as the sound of exploding fuel tankers becomes a nightly occurrence, the disgruntled citizens back home in Russia are starting to feel the heavy price of this conflict. The narrative of a glorious victory is becoming harder to sell when the families of the 58th Guards Army realize their sons are being left hungry and without ammunition in the trenches. The systematic destruction of the rear is tearing up the resistance of the Russian soldier like a piece of paper, because when the occupiers raise their heads to the sky, they know there is no safe bunker left to shelter in. This is the high cost of realpolitik, where the dream of empire is being crushed by the cold, digital precision of 21st century warfare. So, here is the question that will define the next phase of this war. Does the Kremlin have the stomach to sacrifice the entire southern front and its elite formations just to maintain the illusion of a land bridge to Crimea? Or will the logistical suffocation at the hands of the Azov Corps force a total collapse of the occupation much sooner than anyone expected? Sound off in the comments below with your analysis. We want to know if you think Russia can actually adapt to this AI-driven air dominance. If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a deep dive into the changing face of modern conflict. Thanks for watching, and we will see you on the next one.